Hi, everyone. My name is Moran. I am a product manager with Google Cloud, and I have been working with Apache Beam for 5+ years. I've been a part of, the community and a lot of the kind of, I'd say, innovations we've created over the past, half a decade. And I'm really excited to kind of share, what Apache Beam is for some of our newer audience members, but also how does Apache Beam set you up for kind of this new world that we live in. So, to kick things off, I want to firstly just kind of introduce the moment, right? As we all know, from everyone around the world, that generative AI, artificial intelligence, has really captured the world's imagination. New applications around text generation, image generation, and a lot of the kind of use cases that have been kind of proven out by GPT-4, and organizations are now looking for how to turn that excitement into business results. That could mean for more delightful customer interactions, a better kind of use of their own business business performance, as well as understanding where they're how to basically manage a number of different things in their own business processes. And right now we're still in this very kind of early Cambrian explosion period where people are starting to figure out where the use cases are. And from our perspective, the real data that's the most valuable is data that's coming in real time. This is the data that it really presents you kind of an edge that's only accessible to you. It's you're using your kind of unique data advantages, and then essentially combining that with AI will help you really kind of bring about a differentiated product that others might not be able to follow. Secondly, we strongly believe that real-time data allows you to make data-driven decisions faster. And again, in this world where speed and agility make a pretty massive difference to how your business outcomes turn out, this data is probably the most important to really leverage. And yet, from a number of different surveys, we see that only 1 in 5 companies are really excel at maximizing the value from that data. There are issues around the systems themselves, lagging in data processing, and a lot of kind of machine learning aspects of it that you need. Data that lives in various places, from data warehouses to transactional databases, and the difficulty in bringing them all together. And lastly, the tooling right now are, I'd say very, very disparate. Tools that are built for your data applications and tools that are available for your AI applications and tooling. All that stuff really kind of creates this creep of new technologies that that are dealing with the various different types of aspects to make their particular application come to life. So time and time again, when we talk to developers, when we talk to the organizations that they take part that they are part of, what they really want is something that's easy to use, not something that can kind of pick them up, get them to pick up very, very quickly, scalable. The data that is, at this point, data is still kind of in its infant stages, but we definitely see a world in which data will become kind of the most important assets companies will have. And the ability to basically scale up your platform up and down in order to kind of meet the requirements of that data volume is incredibly important. And in making sure that your platform is scalable is an important part of that particular, your technology choice. And then lastly, being able to kind of take, data and insights gleaned from your data, and then turn that into intelligence helps you really kind of, again, drive the differentiated edge that your company will have. And I wanted to, again, quickly kind of survey some of the use cases that we see as the most prevalent for real-time AI, right? Data that is providing applications that are, increase real-time visibility. So the ability to see what's going on with your systems in real time. Things like anomaly detection, security applications, and other, even real-time customer interactions. Secondly, real-time predictions. That's the ability to predict what's going to happen in the future. So that could mean recommendations to help your customers um, pick the best product page they might have, or audience segmentation that'll help kind of offer create the ideal offer for your customers to leverage. And then lastly, the kind of the holy grail we call real time activation, right? The ability to kind of take the data in real time and turn that into kind of a real kind of application logic, that makes your particular your business project that much more efficient, or your customer interaction that much more delightful. That could mean things like just in time alerts for inventory, things like understanding who your customer is in real time and offering them kind of the best kind of user experience if it's for a website. For if you're a manufacturing company and thinking about logistics, being able to respond rapidly to kinks in the supply chain. And all of these really are enabled by real-time data plus a combination of artificial intelligence. So that brings us to Apache Beam. I see a lot of different organizations here today, a lot of different developers, which is really, really exciting. In particular, a lot of different geographies. What I want to do is quickly kind of lay down the foundation for what is Apache Beam. What are you going to be getting into the midst of over the next 3 days? And then let's kind of talk about where are we going in our space that will help you kind of understand that this is the best technology choice you could possibly have. At the highest level, Apache Beam is an open source programming model. It is essentially a way for developers to express common data transformations. We see that a lot of users will develop their own kind of homegrown ETL systems, or will have issues with kind of maintaining bespoke infrastructure. The good thing about Apache Beam is that it is open source, right? So that is available to it's a community that continues to build on the technology itself. It has continued its momentum since it was launched in 2017. And it does not provide any kind of, I'd say, vendor lock-in issues where you're concerned about only really being available on one specific kind of platform. We are year in and year out one of the top Apache projects by developer activity. We offer unified batch and streaming, and I'll speak to why that's important in the coming slides. And we offer runner and language portability. Again, I'm going to kind of wrap all these points up at the end, but I wanted to kind of just level set where what Apache Beam is, what are the kind of main talking points. I'm going to kind of bring them to life for you here. So Apache Beam is essentially, our vision is to allow our developers to choose the language they prefer, to request the pipeline that they need, and have it executed on the right engine of choice, right? So what does that all mean? It starts off with the SDK, right? You have something like a sum per key, right? Like you have a list of very common asks for data processing. You could be filtering data. You could be, writing mapper functions that'll make, modifications to every individual element. You could be doing aggregations and grouping. These are all very common asks for any data processing pipeline. And the Beam SDK enables all that across kind of the entire spectrum of developers. We want to allow developers to choose the language they want. And so another important aspect of Apache Beam is the availability of a variety of different SDKs. We have Apache, we have Java, which is kind of our legacy, our most, historically the most popular SDK. We have Python, which is growing in importance, and I think I'd say at least half of our developers nowadays are using Python. We just launched the Go SDK a couple of years ago, which will again access kind of the benefits of Apache Beam in Go. Customers have the ability to also use SQL, so that they can basically invoke a Beam job via a SQL command. And then most recently, which is not captured here, we've also introduced a YAML SDK, right? So essentially express your pipeline via configuration versus writing code, right? This is probably the lowest barrier of entry for our developers. And it's a very exciting time for customers to start kicking the tires with Beam. There'll be presentations on Beam YAML later this week, so stay tuned for that. Now that I've written my pipeline in the language of choice, now I want to run it, right? And every data processing pipeline requires some kind of infrastructure that it needs to run on. That could be something like Google Cloud Dataflow, which is a managed service on Apache managed service for Apache Beam on Google Cloud. It could be Flink or Spark. These are available across all the clouds. Flink has a managed service in Amazon Web Services, specifically called Kinesis Data Analytics. Apache Spark has various execution engines available in multi clouds, and the ability to also run that on your own engine. The ability to run that in on-prem, run that on your own bespoke infrastructure. And we have a huge list of runners where companies have come to use Apache Beam and realize that they want to be able to run it with their execution engine of choice, and they'll choose to write that in Apache Beam and run that on a various number of runners. One of the kind of exciting benefits of Apache Beam is that this is not supposed to be an exhaustive list of runners that has their own, I'd say, execution engine. They have the ability to write to, create their execution engine of choice, and be able to, bring their Beam pipeline to wherever they want to run. Secondly, on the SDK side, customers are not limited to these options. We have developers that are building all kinds of SDKs. Recently, I came across a developer who is building a Rust SDK. We've had some toy projects on building a TypeScript SDK, right? We have all I'd say the primitives, all of the kind of building blocks to allow you to build your SDK of choice. And so, I don't want to suggest that this is the exhaustive set of SDKs and runners. The really awesome thing about Apache Beam is that it allows you to bring your own SDK or build your own execution engine. So going back to kind of the benefits of Apache Beam, right? So I think that one of the most important ones is a unified API for both batch and streaming scenarios. A long time ago, developers or organizations would have to worry about building a separate stack for batch pipelines, and then develop a completely different stack for streaming scenarios. Apache Beam was one of the first technologies to say that, hey, you don't need to worry about two separate SDKs. You can worry or two different technologies. You can use the same stack with minor modifications to run on your execution engine of choice, right? This is a very powerful idea at the time. And even today, when a lot of companies are really focused on batch processing and are struggling to think about which streaming scenario to take on, Apache Beam offers the ability to offer both batch and streaming in one technology. Portability. This is, again, as I mentioned before, on the execution engine side. Apache Beam can run on not only Amazon Web Services or Azure or Google Cloud. It can also run on-prem. It can run at the edge, and it has a number of different runner environments that allow you to actually leverage the same code in different environments. We have very powerful state and timer APIs. A lot of these we'll talk about are really kind of abstractions on top of these kind of bare bones primitives. But state and timer APIs allow you to manipulate state and timer to do basically just about any kind of logic that you could possibly imagine with your streaming pipeline, right? If you want to be able to fire a timer for a specific event coming in, right? The timer APIs allow for that. If you want to be able to do some kind of unique counting methodology for specific events, the state APIs will allow you to do that. Once again, these are some of the most powerful APIs and not available in most other kind of data processing SDKs. You have the ability to build your own execution environment with custom containers. So for our Python developers, we have Python developers that really love to bring in their own packages, whether it be pandas or some kind of unique tooling. Beam allows you to basically change the execution environment and bring your own custom containers. This, again, is a very powerful thing, especially for our ML developers who require some kind of unique ML capabilities that to be packaged with their pipeline. Custom containers allows you to be able to do that. And similarly, we also have the ability to create cross-language pipelines. Our customers sometimes, they're not monolithic. organizations are not just only have Python developers or Java developers. They'll have kind of usually a mix of all kinds of types. What Beam allows you to do is actually create a cross-language pipeline that can kind of package both elements of a pipeline, both with different languages. I'll give you a very concrete example. Let's say I'm a Python developer that has built, an ML handler that allows me to kind of manage a Python ML model. But I'm a data engineer. My teammate is a data engineer who has written their pipeline in Java. Before, you have to go through a painful refactoring exercise. Now you have the ability to actually combine both of those in one kind of execution with cross-language transformations. And then lastly, kind of the capabilities around windowing, triggers, and sessionization, right? Like these are some of the most common things we see across data processing use cases. The ability to kind of fire your windows at a particular moment, like if I want to collect it every minute, every hour, whatever that might be. I want to have specific control over my triggering logic, right? So that means how do I deal with late data? Is a very important question that many of our customers are asking. And then lastly, sessionization, right? This is a neat little convenience that we provided through Apache Beam that allows you to do something very common in these winning scenarios. So in summary, Apache Beam is a truly universal API that provides both an API for both batch and streaming in one. Two, it's developer friendly. It allows you to kind of use the SDK of your choice to basically drive your own kind of Beam pipelines. And then lastly, portable, right? The ability to run your Beam pipelines on any of your execution engines, whether that be across multiple clouds, on premises, or on the edge. So now that we've kind of talked about what Apache Beam is and what we are seeking to solve for Apache Beam in general, where are we going, right? And I think a lot of this is really around what do we see, where do we see things evolving? And one of the things I already mentioned before at the top of this presentation is we are growing into a world with more and more generative AI applications. We are living in a world of intelligence. We are living where our devices or our wearables or our laptops know more of the context is happening around you, and that alone will create a better experience for customers, but two, a new opportunity for companies to really kind of differentiate their product offerings. And we've talked a little bit about Beam primitives, right? We talked about how you could write things like combiners, do funds, group by keys, a lot of these kind of very cool, very specific types of Beam Beam primitives that allow you to basically build any pipeline that you possibly want. But as cool as they are, Apache Beam has been introducing the idea of a turnkey transformation, right? Today, Apache Beam gives you the building blocks, and in the future, we plan to give you at least a slightly higher level abstraction for that. We want it so that it's particularly a lot easier to basically, basically do a very common pattern without having to write a lot of boilerplate code. What does that look like? So, you might have a pipeline that is, reading from some kind of file. It is, reading matches and then pre-processing those images. But now you want to be able to do some kind of pattern. And as a way to introduce this, let's talk about the ML inference pattern, right? If I'm producing predictions for my particular, ML from a model, think about all the things I need to think about when it comes to productionizing that data. I have to think about efficiently sharing that model across multiple endpoints. I have to think about how do I deal with errors and dead letter queues in case I get results that are not not well formed. I get a set of metrics. I need metrics for observability. I need to see what's happening with my pipeline. I have to think about how do I configure and how do I think about updating my models. Now, once again, all these things are not really straightforward. And in reality, thinking about all these things could take potentially thousands of lines of code. Well, with our with Apache Beam's run inference, you can now call streaming, for instance, in one line of code, right? That highlighted that highlighted line right there shows something we call run inference, right? The ability to essentially specify a model and some properties associated with that model to basically call a prediction by your Beam pipeline. Um, that's just a radical idea that eliminates a lot of the kind of boilerplate. As we go back to the last slide, a lot of the things you think about for productionization. And once again, we are in the process of building more turnkey transformations as part of Apache Beam to make ML even easier than ever. Let's take enrichment, right? I have a pipeline that is reading, a sequence of events, streaming events, and I want to augment that data with, some kind of lookup table. So let's take, I'm reading a stream of a clickstream data, and I want to be able to augment it with some kind of historical pattern. I might be reading, data from devices, and I want to be able to identify some kind of anomaly that's maybe stored in, the lookups stored in another table. And then lastly, like let's take a financial services example. I wanted to take, the kind of incoming market data, and I want to match it with, historic information around to build real-time indices. Well, with Beam, we allow for we now create enrichment, right? The ability to kind of enrich your pipelines with one, basically one line of code, right? Once again, thinking about what we're doing here, we're taking, thousands of lines of code and boiling it down to one particular kind of transformation. We have been doing this for other pieces of the ML workflow, things like ML transform for pre-processing, and we'll be doing some new bits around feature engineering in the future. But once again, I think there's a lot of reason to be excited for what's happening in Apache Beam. And as a developer who might be new to this particular technology, I want to encourage you to think that this is still a growing project. We certainly love people using it, but not even more so people that are helping contribute. And our direction right now is how do we make it easier, in particular for ML use cases, right? Like how do I equip a team of developers to create a ML application within hours and not months?